Okay. We're ready whenever you're ready.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Let's note the meeting start time. I have 7:31 on my clock. Hey, can we do a roll call?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Ms. Bright? Rosemary, can you hear us? She just said good morning. I'm not sure she's having trouble with her audio. Oh.
Good morning. Sorry, I just got dumped and got back on.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Dickinson? She's absent. Oh, there she is. Good morning, Susanna. We're just doing the roll call.
Hi, sorry, I was a couple of minutes late.
Okay. Ms. Clement?
Present.
Mr. Kapler let me know he wasn't going to be able to make it. Mr. Stevie?
Present. Should I move to review and approval of the legal action report of 8/6/21? I'd entertain a motion for that.
I move to approve.
I second the motion.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 Any noes? Maria, sounds like we have unanimous on that.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Let me go back to the agenda. We have the call to the audience as next.
Are there any participants on this call that are not directly related to a topic on the agenda? Would they like to come forward? Hearing none, let's move on to the next item on the agenda.
Mr. Chair, this is case DRB-RNA 2005 for the historic VFW building. The DRB has reviewed this project a couple of times in the past, the original submittal and then a second, one revision, and they're coming back with a second revision to the approved design package. The PRS also reviewed this project. The last time they did was last September 9, and they approved it with the one condition that any additional modifications to the exterior of the structure would need to be reviewed by the PRS. The applicant is here, ready to present the proposed changes.
Did you want me to share my screen or are we using yours?
No, go ahead, Bill. I'm going to stop sharing mine.
All right, I'll see if I can find the right.
I guess, Bill, this is Chris. For sake of clarity on this one, I'd ask Susanna and Carol and Rosemary, do we have consensus that we understand and remember the prior submittals on this, and we can really just focus on the changes that they're proposing? We don't need to run through the full project background again, or would we prefer to kind of take a backtrack and get a summary of where we were.
Chris, this is Carol Clement. I think I remember it pretty well. I do have some a couple of questions, but maybe in the presentation by Mr. Williams, those will be covered. So I'll wait and see.
Yes, please. Questions at the end.
Yeah, and I can move through this fairly quickly if most of you have already been involved in the other reviews. So I won't sort of belabor everything here. Obviously, I think you're all aware of the parcel that we're talking about, the building that we were talking about. It's located on Broadway, right across from the AC Marriott Hotel. And this is the lot, building 124, the VFW building. Again, this is part of the initial application, so just going through some of what was presented before, kind of existing context, the neighborhood. These are the modifications that are being asked to be approved today. The red lines through here are based on the conversation with the historic review and their comments. So what has changed to the project is that initially the ground floor and lower level was going to be completely sort of retail, commercial, office space with only residential on the upper level. Based on kind of existing market conditions downtown, the lack of interest in people for office space and actually restaurant space right now, the developers determined that it would be better to increase the number of residential units in the building and reduce the amount of commercial and office/retail space. The front portion of the building along Broadway will remain as potential retail, commercial, restaurant, but the sort of the back 2/3 of the first floor will be converted into 5 residential units. Each of these units will have a stair that connects them to the lower level as well. So they're fairly large units. So we're basically, that's the primary change to the project. Along the east elevation of the building, originally the developer had asked for a roll-up door to be installed in one of the existing sort of historic elevations of the building. At this point, he no longer wishes to do that. So just sort of as a technicality, we want to make sure that we can leave it as it is. He recognizes that should he decide to do this or want to do this in the future, he'll have to come back for approval at a later date. North elevation, no changes. West elevation is what has changed. I'm sorry here. I'm going to say changed the most, but it actually is very little. And I'll cover that in more detail as we look at some drawings. The west patio area has actually changed a little bit, and there's a minor change that we'd like to make in the public right-of-way, which again is we want to leave something as it is rather than changing it. This was just an updated description of the project, which you've all had an opportunity to see. And I'll blow through that. This is the VFW building as it exists today. So much of the exterior work has been completed. The north side of the building, the trees that were requested have been added. The landscaping has been planted along the base of the building. If I go down to here, the public patio, part of that has been constructed. Primarily along the street edge. Plantings have been put in place. So you can see they have done what has been previously approved. And then on the east side of the building, it has been painted. And then the area where my cursor is right now, that's the area where the developer had previously requested that a roll-up door be installed in this opening. At this point, he wishes to just leave the building as it is. I did put in this shade study briefly to point out that one of the revisions that we're requesting is we are omitting one tree from the patio, but that particular tree is sort of back here where my cursor is, so it has no impact on the shade of the pedestrian right away. And I'll show that more in a minute as well. And I'm just showing a couple of the previous development plan submittals. This is the currently approved development plan, the site plan. And what we're going to be talking about today really is this area right in here and a little bit up in that area. Again, this was the approved development plan. And then the first revision, when we came back, if you recall, this area originally we had intended to slope it or excavate and slope down toward the building in order to get windows in the lower level. That was very expensive to do, so we came back with basically a retaining wall to create a light well to allow us to still put windows in that lower level. This particular revision, again, here's what was approved the last go around. So this was the area well right here, and that is the sort of patio that's associated with the interior restaurant retail space. And then this is the current proposed alterations to that development plan. The first request is that we actually want to expand the patio area that's associated with the interior of the building. And we're doing that because now the line between residential and retail occurs right here in the building. So we basically wanted to move that line down so that the patio on the outside is associated with the interior area, kind of on a 1-to-1 ratio there. The other change is that the light well has been eliminated, and we're adding 3 private exterior patios that are associated with the residential units that are inside adjacent to those patios. And these patios will have screen walls to give them some privacy as well as provide some security. Along the street, currently there exists a vehicle access ramp from the street onto this patio area, and the developer is now requesting that that just remain as it is. They found that it's been very, very useful in working on the building, working on the patio, maintaining the building, because as you know, the modern streetcar runs right in front of the building, so there's very, very little room for any maintenance vehicles or anything to pull out of the way. So they've been using this as sort of an access point to help to maintain the building. Pardon my voice here. And then this is the revised landscape plan that shows the patio being extended. And then I had mentioned that we are losing one tree, and it happens to be the tree that's right there. I don't know if you recall, but all of the trees were laid out sort of geometrically in relationship to what was going on the inside of the building and the facade and the rhythm of the facade. And that particular tree was right on that line that separates sort of the commercial space from the residential space. So that's the tree that we've lost, but all of the others remain as is, including those that were requested to add to the project. Are there any questions about this that I could answer?
I have a question, Carol Clement, DRB. The light well replaced with on-grade private patios for apartments, is that at those private patios, are they at the basement grade or the street elevation grade? I'm a little confused there.
Okay, yes, they're at the street elevation.
Okay.
So we've eliminated the idea of adding windows at that lower level, at that basement level. So these patios are on the same grade as the landscaped area immediately to the west.
Thank you.
This is Susanna. Dick, I just wondered, what are you guys doing with the basement then?
Oh, the basement?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Yeah, beneath the, I'll go sort of quickly, but one by one. This is the larger retail space. And as you can see, there's a stairwell that's being added to that lower level. So whoever leases this space will have access directly down to that lower level, whether they want to use it to sort of expand whatever service they're providing or for storage or whatever, but that will become part of that space. The small retail space over here, we're also adding a stair to the lower level, so they will be able to occupy that space immediately below them. Then each residential unit also has a stair that goes down to the lower level. So basically, all of this space at the lower level will be residential. It will be part of the units above. And we've cut the stairwell openings a little bit larger than they needed to be. And we've arranged them in such a way that the natural light coming in from the windows spills over into that stairwell opening so that we do get some natural light down into that lower level. Any other questions about that?
Carol Clement, DRB. Previous plan had 5-foot square raised concrete planters for some of the trees. Have those been completely removed, and all the trees are planted at grade now?
They are all planted at grade now.
Okay.
Even the ones on the patio, I mean, that there is a square area, and then that's infilled with DG
Right.
around the base of the tree.
All righty. And then what are you doing with your site drainage, the storm water drainage off-site? I'm assuming it generally flows to the south towards Broadway. How are you grading those patio areas?
Yeah, each patio area slopes toward this space out here, so they actually drain onto this. And then you're correct that the on-site drainage all heads out toward Broadway.
So it will be sheet flow over those at grade plantings?
It will be, but again, this is all DG, so
Okay, right.
most of that area, the water will simply be absorbed into the ground at that point.
Thank you.
Any other questions I might answer?
Just with the residential not really having much light in that lower level, is that to code, or is that part of this application approval too, that you're getting a variance because of the historic nature of the building?
No, it is to code. Actually, the plans for this have already been approved. What you need is, the code is written that you need light and ventilation. And that light can be either artificial light or natural light. And ventilation can be natural ventilation or it can be mechanical ventilation. So we do have some degree of natural light that penetrates down into that lower level by virtue of adding these stairwells. And actually, I've been over there recently, and it's amazing how much light does penetrate to that lower level. All of these floor openings have been cut. So there is a fair degree of natural light that gets down there, and all of the residential spaces are mechanically ventilated. So it does meet the code.
Yeah, I guess maybe it depends what type of room it is. Maybe that's why it's all open plan.
Yeah, everything is very open plan. There are no walled in like bedroom areas. Really, the only enclosed space is the restroom. Each unit has a little laundry, washer dryer area. And at the lower level, there is an enclosed closet area for storage. Otherwise, everything is open plan and can be arranged in whatever way the tenant chooses to do so.
This is Carol Clement again. Mr. Stevie, I would like to ask, what do you think of the selection of the Chinese pistache for these trees in this patio area? Are you comfortable with that?
I am. We've had this discussion on this project prior.
Yeah.
And they are already planted.
Well,
based on prior approval, they're already planted.
Right. It just gets to be a big tree, but water deep so the roots don't heave things.
And Carol, on that point, yeah, their locations are pretty far away from actual paving and or footer situations. And I'm not sure if you brought this, if this was on a prior submittal or not, but the tree right at like the northwest corner of the building, not the street tree, but the one right at the northwest corner of the building, yes, it was planted out as a desert willow. So
I'm a little concerned with that. I'm a little concerned with that. I know it's probably planted already, but that Chinese pistache in the row furthest to the north, that it's right there on the edge of the sidewalk and heaving possibilities there.
Yeah, that should be easily mitigated. I think just to speak for the applicant, that the paving in that area, if I remember correctly, is mostly brick modular.
It is, yeah.
Repairs in that area, if that occurs in the next 2 decades, should be easily taken care of. I want to turn the conversation a little bit. I walk by this site regularly. I live right around the corner. In your application and all the materials presented to this review board and on your IID, materials are all called out as the fencing materials, and your patio screen materials are all called out as being the same material. On site, the fencing closest to the street and around the patio is a bright red versus the galvanized steel or kind of grayish tones that the rest of the building has, and as are presented on all of our materials. Is that a primer coat or is that the actual color? Because if it's actual color, it's not what's being presented.
Yeah, it is the primer coat on the steel, and it has not been painted yet. We still have issues with some of the installation of it, and they need to make some modifications before it receives its final paint coat.
Fantastic. That's what I wanted to hear. Perfect. Any other items from the board?
I mean, I could quickly, let's see, that there were a couple of elevations here. Again, this is showing what was previously approved for the west elevation. And this is the current, that shows the private patio walls. So we're doing a combination of a solid panel and then a more perforated panel. So it's sort of a yin and yang with what happens up above, where up above we have a perforated panel with a solid panel, and down below we have a perforated panel with a solid panel. So it has kind of a nice visual bouncing up and down along that elevation. One of the comments that was made during the historic review was it was difficult to see, but these windows have been installed already, and we are modifying those windows to insert a door so that the residential units can get access to their patios. So we made that annotation on this drawing to make sure that that's clear. And on the north,
to be clear on that, Bill, to be
yes.
clear on that, the shape, form, scale, proportion of that opening that you were just describing does not change, just the operation and kind of internal framing
Correct.
change that.
Right.
Okay.
If you look at this window here, it's basically removing these two mullions and inserting a door within that area. So we're really using the same window system that's in place and just modifying it. Again, no changes to the north. And then on the east side, this was the previously approved plan that showed the roll-up door being inserted. And now we are simply requesting that it be left alone. And this was a previously presented perspective view. And this is the current. So you can see just a little bit back here, this is the private patio area that's being created. We have another view here. So again, this is the current proposal. And again, the current proposal. So again, you can just slightly see in the background here, those are the private residential patios. And that's the presentation.
It seems pretty straightforward from my end. I don't know how the other members feel.
I would agree, Susanna. I think it, it definitely makes a lot of sense, and it's visually clean and appealing.
I agree.
I propose as for sake of brevity that we don't spend the time going through all the pieces, number 1, 2, 3, number through 14 or whatever of the Rio Nuevo. And I'd like to, I guess, propose we entertain a motion if I guess we just took kind of a straw poll there. Because we've already kind of done that whole process for this project. We're really just looking at the revisions. And I think speaking from what I just heard, we all kind of, I think this board we've had our questions, and I don't think we need to go through that whole list. So
I'll make a motion that the Design Review Board, DRB, has reviewed the applicant's project for compliance with Rio Nuevo area design criteria and recommends to the Planning and Development Services Director approval, finding the project in compliance with the building design standards set forth in UDC sections 5.12.7.c 1 to 15 and 5.12.7.d. And that was the end. Sorry.
I second the motion.
call for a vote, or actually any discussion first? Hearing none, call for a vote. Ayes?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Maria, sounds like we have unanimous again.
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the DRB.
Thanks, Bill. As I mentioned, I walk by that site often. I'm glad to see it finally being energized. So keep up the work.
Will do. And if you know of a great retailer looking for some space, let us know.
No, but I that was the one point on the checklist that as I was reading through the application earlier, I was like, let's hope make sure they keep the retail on the very front frontage, and you did. So that was the only thing I was. Awesome.
Okay, great.
Good work.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks. Take care. Bye-bye.
Next agenda item, Maria, is some TEP
Yes.
stuff.
Yes, yes, Mr. Chair, members of the DRB. This is another Tucson water site, DRB 2116. This is a special exception request, and the applicant is also available to make a presentation on the proposed improvements on the site that is in the middle of a neighborhood. And just like the previous cases that you reviewed for Tucson water wells, your recommendation will be forwarded to the zoning examiner. And I'm displaying here the DRB's purview. So that's all I have.
Let's move on to the presentation. Lexi's back.
I'm back. You guys are very familiar with this process at this point. But good morning, members of the DRB, and thank you for being here this morning. My name is Lexi Wellett, and I'm a project manager at the Planning Center, and we're located in downtown Tucson. I am here before you all this morning to request a special exception and your review for an existing Tucson water well site that they're currently going through the process of designing some improvements to the site. And so I'm going to share my screen real quick. If somebody could let me know when that comes through, that would be much appreciated. Can you all see that?
You are up.
Perfect. So this well site, as Maria mentioned, it's located at 2700 Alta Vista Street, which is about a block south of Glen Avenue, and it's just west, or Glen Street and just west of Tree Avenue. Tucson Water's property in its entirety is 0.24 acres in size. And as I mentioned, this is a currently operating well site. And the process that Tucson Water is going through is they're looking at all of their centrally located well sites and making some improvements to better serve the community. So this site will be basically just reconfigured, if you will, with a new well and some more modern technology, as you guys have been purviewed to many times now. So just to run through the basics of this site as it exists today, the well yard is just, it's, I believe, currently 0.6 acres or 0.06 acres in size, and the property, as I mentioned, is 0.24. So the well yard occupies a much smaller footprint than the actual property itself. But in looking at the existing treatment on the site, the well yard itself is enclosed with a 7-foot tall fence that is chain link with a foot of barbed wire on top of it, and it has some privacy slats inserted in it. The exterior property boundary is enclosed as well, but it's enclosed with privately owned either wall or fences that are maintained by the adjacent property owners. So in our proposal moving forward, we aren't proposing any changes to the boundary itself, just really the internal well yard. So the well yard today has an electrical rack and a shade structure that's 6 feet in height. It's got a disinfection system on it. It's got a well, actually 2 wells on the property. That one has since been commissioned, and one once the new well is drilled on this site will be used for monitoring purposes. So again, all similar features you have all been purviewed to in previous cases. So just running through basically the items you see on your screen in blue are the elements that are going to stay basically the treatment that the neighbors maintain in terms of screening. Now, as far as new proposed elements to this site, Tucson Water is proposing to modify the existing enclosure of the well yard, which is the 7-foot fence, and they are proposing to install an 8-foot tall decorative masonry wall built to City of Tucson standards to fully enclose the well, which is in compliance with the requirements of the special exception. In addition, they are proposing we're still working out the details through the design, but it'll be a control building or shade structure in the northern quadrant of the site, again, set back appropriately in compliance with the special exception process. In working through this process as well, we are proposing to install a streetscape border along Alta Vista adjacent to the newly proposed decorative masonry wall. You may be wondering why there isn't landscape proposed along the east and west side along Alta Vista Road, and the answer is there are existing TEP easements and other utility easements that run in those areas. Therefore, we have to remain them free of vegetation. So, and moving through this, the site plan again, we're really just reconfiguring the site with the existing elements on site. So it'll have a building or a shade structure, both of which will be less than 10 feet in height and set back 20 feet from the property lines at a minimum. And then a new 8-foot decorative wall, a new 5,000-gallon hydro tank on it, etc. So again, all of the things that you guys are familiar with. And in working with Tucson Water and the neighbors on this site, we held a neighborhood meeting and had one neighbor come out in the process. I think there was actually another one, but he did not speak or wasn't participating. But the woman that participated in our neighborhood meeting understood. She's lived next to the well for many years and just had some questions about timing and schedule for the drilling of the new well, which Tucson Water's communication officer has been in contact with her, and they will be providing updates regularly as we get closer to the drilling process there. And then additionally, we've been working with the neighbor to the west to mitigate some issues with vegetation. Currently, he has a very large tree in his yard that is in poor condition. And so through this process, we've worked with the city and Tucson Water to actually remove that large tree that is in poor condition, and actually are working with him to replace with a number of mesquite trees, which will better serve both, I think, the well site and the neighbor in terms of providing additional screening, etc. So again, just you guys are familiar with this, just wanted to present some imagery as to what some of these items look like. Again, the hydro tank, the control building, the electrical rack, any new element put on site will be reflective of the existing conditions and will be painted to match other equipment on site. So they'll be tan, as you can see in the images here. Briefly recap, Tucson Water is requesting a special exception to equip a replacement well that will be drilled in this next year. And then the construction of that, equipping this well will happen in the fall. Noise mitigation measures will be implemented during the drilling process, and that is something that Tucson Water is very familiar with, and we'll work with the neighbors as we move forward. And then our request is to install, once we drill a new well, install a number of features. So 100-square-foot control building or straight structure, a communication antenna, maximum height of 20 feet, a new 5,000-gallon hydro tank, landscaping along Alta Vista, a new 8-foot decorative wall around the yard. And then one item I forgot to mention is Tucson Water does own this section of fence along the wall, so they will be, or along the western boundary, and so they will be refreshing a small segment that they own with new vinyl slats to ensure that the well is compatible as it exists today. And then the yard will be finished with gravel and then TEP transformer boxes, etc., and all the pipes and other equipment necessary to function the site will also be installed. So with that, I will turn it over to you for any questions you may have. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lexi. Anyone have any questions for this applicant right at this time?
Yes, I do. The landscaping along Alta Vista. Why aren't we seeing a plan on this, and how will the new proposed landscape be irrigated? The,
So
go ahead.
go ahead. Oh, so just to answer your question, we're still working out the design of the landscape plan in its entirety there. So unfortunately, we don't have a plan, but what I can tell you is that it will be designed in compliance with the City of Tucson standards, and irrigation will be provided by Tucson Water as we've recommended on other sites as well. And it'll be irrigated in per the requirements of the City of Tucson.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And you're fixing the neighbor's tree. How nice of you.
Thanks, thank you. No, it's one of those elements where it's an very old tree and nobody wants to get rid of it, but the condition of it is it's in a poor state. So we felt it was necessary to work with him to ensure that we don't change the way it works for him right now.
Is that tree a safety hazard?
The tree that's currently on his property, I don't know if it's a safety hazard today, but we are working with Irene Ogata at the city as well as an arborist to figure out the best course of action. But my understanding is the recommendation is that it comes down as we go through this process to ensure that it doesn't become a safety hazard, if you will.
Right, it's more of a neighborhood relations item than a safety and welfare issue.
Yes, that is correct.
Awesome. I thought I saw a hand raised. Maria, did you see that? I can't see the whole panel of everyone.
I don't see any hand raised. Oh, wait a minute, Dorothy from Tucson Water.
Yes, hi. This is Dorothy with Tucson Water. This is my project. And to add to Lexi's explanation about the neighbor's tree, some of the branches encroach over into our property, and it would be a safety hazard for when the driller comes to set up to do the new well. And to cut the branches would not, the arborist recommended that the whole tree's pretty much dead. To remove the whole tree as opposed to trying to remove some of the branches. So to answer your question, for the Tucson Water work that's planned, it could prove a hazard, but as it sits right now, it's not a safety hazard. Thank you.
Thanks for clarification on
that. Chris and Maria, forgive me if I'm not understanding the process, but I don't understand why we don't have a landscaping plan along Alta Vista as part of this submittal. Is it not required? I mean, to be honest with you, the landscaping of these well sites throughout town is dismal. And it seems like we're just potentially continuing that process here by allowing this to move forward without a landscaping plan. Perhaps there's something I'm not understanding here.
Yeah, unfortunately, nobody from the entitlement section is here today, Ms. Clements. But my understanding is when applicants provide the request for a rezoning or a special exception, they could be at a conceptual level, with the understanding that different conditions may be imposed by staff or the zoning examiner, in this case also by the DRB, as recommendations for the final approval. But I will definitely bring that up to entitlement staff and get clarification on that.
Thank you, Maria, because I would like to start seeing the landscape plans for these well sites.
Okay.
Along with the proposed irrigation.
Actually, Carol, to speak to that point, I'm not 100% certain that critique on plant selection and items of that nature are necessarily under our purview other than meeting code requirements. That's City of Tucson Development Services purview. Our task is to understand the criteria of, are they providing landscape, is landscape required in that area, and we can make recommendations that we would like to see drought tolerant, micro basins, or give recommendations as to items to be included in that landscaping. But I do not believe our purview is to really get down to planting plans. We're provided those on a lot of projects, but on these, in the past, we've come up with this, that it's really development services purview to get down to the individual plant material. Maria, am I incorrect in that?
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. However, I will double check with entitlement staff.
So Carol, if you remember that we did this process for the plant over by the hospital, and that was very conceptual in a lot of its graphics, and we're under the understanding that there are going to be trees added to this site where there, Lexi, correct me if I'm wrong, there are not trees where you propose them currently.
Yeah, but we don't know if there are going to be trees, and it sounds like we don't really have a.
That would be part of this process, Carol, is that we're approving this, that they're showing landscaping and trees in that location. If it comes out that it is found that they were not installed, that really would trigger them coming back to this through this process to say, we've made a modification to the plan that we're not going to install that. Then we can have that conversation.
And if I may add to Chris's point there, Carol, part of the city's requirements is that trees are to be planted, one per every linear 33 feet. And so part of the city's code will require that both trees, shrubs, and ground covers will be installed. And so our intent is to plant a landscape buffer along these areas where it is required to the intent of the code.
And Mr. Chair, Ms. Clemens, you can also include in your motion any type of language, to requesting or recommending to the zoning examiner to ensure that, that criteria is met, or any other criteria that you think it's appropriate.
Thank you. Lexi, may I ask?
Correct. Like Carol, I'd like if in a motion, I think, since we're on that topic, I would like to make sure there is some wording about, adherence to the City of Tucson water harvesting guidelines, to make sure there's at least a little bit of a micro basin there.
Yes, I'm writing down some thoughts. Okay, Lexi, I have a question. Where could I go see a well site that has been completed with what you would consider a representative landscape buffer as to the direction how TEP is really following through on this? Or TEP, Miss TEP representative, where can I go see what you would consider a good example of a completed project?
So there's one, and Dorothy, I'm not sure if you're familiar. We've worked on.
Oh, Lexi froze. Dorothy, do you have an example to share with the DRB?
I don't, because I've been in the approval process for the last few years, and the one that is going to have landscaping just got building permits. So it'll be 6 months before that one's built, and you can see the landscaping on it. That's the well site on Nancy Rose. But Lexi could probably speak to what else Tucson Water's done, because I'm just one person. I think she's covered some of the other project managers' needs with assistance for compliance.
So, Ms. Clement, I can follow up with the applicant And
Thank you,
there she
Maria.
is. There she is.
Yeah, I just get the feeling that this is just being kicked down the field and that no one really is looking at compliance with the landscape buffer is the feeling I'm getting. Sorry.
No, and Ms. Clements, if I may add here, there is a site located, and I can send it to Maria, get the specific address
Okay.
after this, and she can forward it on to you. But there is one site that the Planning Center has worked on. It's located near Irvington and 12th, I believe. And it's a very similar instance where it's a well site that was a new well site, actually, that Tucson Water drilled, and we put in a new wall and landscaping on that site as well. So I'll get that address over to Maria, and you can take a look at that. But as working on the individual working on a lot of these, I've been pushing a very similar instance in that we need to put landscaping where we can and where it makes sense. So it's required always along the streetscape, and so if the site lends for it and isn't entirely disruptive to the operation itself, then that's been the recommendation I've been moving forward on. It's just unfortunate there's really, I think, only one that has been constructed that has gone through this process. So I'll get that address over to Maria so you can visit that site.
Yeah. Thank you, Lexi. I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem.
And Mr. Chair and Ms. Clements, the city has also in the process of issuing any building permit, they have to have inspectors go out and make sure that improvements have taken place before they can finalize the project.
Well, just as a final thing, it seems like, yes, they're checking for improvements, but there's no real detailed information in terms of what the landscape improvements should be. So it's not really looked at closely.
Yeah, that's done through the development package process.
Okay.
And any construction documents process, the review process, and then once the plans are approved, the applicant has X number of months to complete the approved improvements, and the inspectors make sure that those take place.
Okay, well, maybe visiting the Irvington and 12th well site will ease my concerns. So thank you, Lexi, for when you do forward that to Miss Maria.
Carol, this is Chris. I'd like to recommend that if you're looking to make the motion, that you would add language to that motion from a bit of a zoning perspective of that the landscape border meet city Tucson requirements. They're not going to be able to get past getting a building permit without meeting that requirement. But that if you have any recommendations as to what you'd like to see in there, i.e. drought tolerant, native, visually stunning, hummingbird eccentric, I don't know, whatever criteria you'd like to see emphasized on the plan that they do propose to put forth to development services, that's where we put it in. And then in the zoning examiner looks at this project, they can either add that condition to their exemption approval or not. That's really our purview at this point.
Yeah, I know.
We can add that stuff in, but it's really up to Ann over at Development Services to drill down on the landscape border and make sure that they're meeting the criteria within the city code.
Yeah.
So with that, I'd love to entertain a motion so we can move on with our day.
Okay, well, I'll take a stab at this. I would like to make a motion. The Design Review Board has reviewed the. Am I reading the right thing, Maria?
Yes, Ms. Clements.
Thank you. I'd like to make.
Actually, can you hold on one second, Carol? I forgot to pull this out for the rest of the group. Does Rosemary or
oh, sorry.
Anyone else have any comments, questions, any other topics we'd like to cover before we move into making motions?
No, I'm satisfied. Thanks.
Okay, I just didn't want to leave anyone out.
I'm fine too, thanks.
Okay, now you're up, Carol.
Okay, you guys know I'm not very good at this, but I'll take a stab at it. Okay. The Design Review Board has reviewed the applicant's project for compliance with special exception use specific standards for a utilities distribution system and finds this project in compliance with the use specific standard set forth in UD section 4.9.11.A.88 with the following recommendations: that the proposed landscape border along Alta Vista be comprised of drought-tolerant native plants and strict adherence to City of Tucson's water harvesting guidelines. What do you guys think?
What do you mean you're not very good at this, Carol? That was perfect.
Well, maybe. Thank you, Chris.
Can I hear a second?
I will second the motion.
And please have strict in there.
Bold it, Maria, bold.
Yes.
I'll underline it too.
I'm
Any
going to
further
check the
discussion?
minutes.
Hearing none, I'd like to put forth a vote. Ayes?
Aye.
Aye.
Nays? Hearing none, Maria, sounds like we have another unanimous on this case.
Yes, Mr. Chair. And just want to mention that Lexi just included in the chat the address
Oh,
for the site that she mentioned, and the address is 4965 South 13th Avenue.
thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you all so much. We'll see you again soon, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Lexi.
Yeah, thanks, Lexi. Keep adding trees to those sites. The more trees we can get in the streetscape, the better. Thank you. Maria, staff announcements?
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the DRB, just to let you know, this last Tuesday, the Mayor and Council finalized the approval of the Sunshine Mile District. So we're gonna be arranging for a training session for DRB members on the reviews for the Sunshine Mile, for projects within the Sunshine Mile District. And I already have a couple of them online being brewed to be reviewed. So what I wanted to ask the DRB, if you prefer for that training session to take place just by itself, or just try to achieve it whenever we have other cases for review.
I think
Maria, this is-
individually might,
sorry.
sorry, go ahead, Chris.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think it might be more convenient to have it available individually.
I guess I'm not sure I completely understood. Is it something online that we do individually, or as a group? It just seems like we need to do it before we hear any of the cases, obviously. Because it seems...
and I can share with you the link to the Sunshine Mile document. We just wanted to, explain to you again the overall, overlay, and the reviews are going to be different than what you're used to, like with the Rio Nuevo area applications, or like in this case with the special exceptions. The purview of the DRB, it's a very limited set of criteria, right, that you go through relatively quickly. Unlike the Sunshine Mile District that has all kinds of criteria. And So what you're used to in terms of going item by item may not be achievable at each review. So there's gotta be a more comprehensive type of review. We will have a design professional as part of the DRB for the Sunshine Mile District cases. But I'll definitely share with you as soon as it's available the final document, and you can start taking a look at it, and we can also arrange for that training session virtually with the DRB to go over the document.
Maria, this is Carol. I like the idea of us starting to look at it individually, but an actual training session with other DRB members I think might be helpful, because often hearing people's questions helps me to understand, of course.
Okay.
Yeah,
I agree with that approach.
I definitely want a training session because this is a big issue coming up that's concern, Yeah. So I just want to do a bit of homework in advance.
Okay. Mr. Stevie?
Yeah, Maria, if I remember correctly, when we did this process for the Brent Road overlay, we had a session with city representatives and I believe the design professional that was going to be a member that would sit on the board and board those cases only was present at that, and we did it during a normally scheduled DRB meeting time.
Yeah,
Correct?
and what we've been doing is, like, if we don't see cases to be reviewed, we cancel the meeting. But what I wanted to know, if there's no cases, if we could still just meet just to discuss the Sunshine Mile within the already scheduled dates.
That sounds great.
Okay, very good. So we'll make sure to do that. And in terms of future projects, what we have coming up to you, it's a variance request to the Board of Adjustment, and for that the DRB makes a recommendation. So there's a TP project requesting that variance, and also there's an office conversion on Congress Street into a bar, and it's H designated zone property. It's a historic building, so that's coming up your way, and that's what I have coming up. And maybe also a solar canopy on top of the Wells Fargo building in downtown.
Oh, those sound like tons of fun. Maria, back to the Sunshine Mile. We may need to do a little bit of diligence on that. I was a landscape architect on the roadway portion of that project and have been in contract negotiations with several projects along that corridor. So a little bit of notice prior to when those projects come up after we do that training would be appreciated, so I can make sure I'm not on that project, or make sure my not being able to be on a call would not interrupt quorum.
Okay. Yeah, we'll just follow procedure here then to avoid
and
any
maybe
issues.
get some clarity from staff on whether or not me being involved in the roadway widening impacts my ability to be on reviewing private parcels. I wouldn't think so, but you never know.
I don't think so, because that's something else. The Sunshine Mile, it's a different tool. It's not a roadway project. So I don't think there's any issues, but I'll double check.
I just want to be clear and transparent. I guess those are both the same word, so I just want to be transparent.
Thank you, and that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Any other discussion? I'd love to wrap this thing out. No?
Nope.
No.
I'd say let's call for adjournment, 8:35.
Okay. Thank you so much, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
You too. Take care.